Hello, everyone. Welcome to our spotlight conversation on women's issues. We're going to just give everybody a minute to connect to audio and get set up. So bear with us. We'll start momentarily.
I should mention that during the presentation, if you have questions, please put them in the chat. We will be capturing them to give to the panelists as we go, but we have removed the ability to unmute and ask questions, so we will just be capturing questions from the chat, so please be sure to put them there.
We've still got people coming in, so I'm just going to give it one more moment before we start, but I do want to respect everybody's time, so just one more moment.
Thank you all so much for joining us this evening. And I also want to mention we are recording this meeting. You probably got that announcement. So if you have friends or people that who were not able to come this evening, you will get the link so you can forward it to them.
Yes, and it will also be available on our YouTube channel in a day or two. So we are going to go ahead and get started. Thank you all so much for joining us this evening for our spotlight conversation on women's equality and women's rights. So we have two panelists with us here tonight. The first is the incomparable Julie Gunnigal. So Julie was born and raised here in Maricopa County. She's a lawyer, a former law professor, and a former prosecutor. This is her second campaign for Maricopa County attorney, having run and narrowly lost in 2020. And famously, Julie has pledged to never use the resources of the county attorney's office to go after pregnant people, their healthcare workers, or their support networks. Not now, not ever, which is one of my favorite campaign t-shirts that I've ever seen. And Tricia is going to drop her website into the chat in case you want to learn more about her. And our other panelist is Christine Marsh. And Senator Marsh is a 30-year career teacher and Arizona's 2016 Teacher of the Year. Voters elected her last cycle to her first term in the Arizona Senate. She was one of only a handful of minority party lawmakers to get a bill passed, which is really remarkable because the legislature passes hundreds of bills into law each year, but usually the minority party only gets like single digits, very few. Senator Marsh is running for re-election to serve the newly drawn Legislative District 4 against an extremist ideologue who's taken aim squarely at women's rights. So I would like to open tonight by Senator Marsh. I'm going to lob you the first question. Arizona's statute relating to abortion care was already pretty draconian before the 2022 legislative session. We required all kinds of stuff, mandatory 24-hour waiting period, biased counseling and ultrasound, restrictions on private insurance coverage, a ban on telemedicine, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But this year we added some things. So will you tell us about that? Tell us what's going on with Arizona law right now.
We added Senate Bill 1164, which is now a law, and that is the very draconian Mississippi-style abortion ban that starts at 15 weeks. However, because of the way gestational age is calculated, it's actually really more like 11 to 13 weeks. And it allows for no exceptions for rape or incest. It deals with the life of the mother, but not the health of the mother. And I can go into detail about that like later, but, talk to an oncologist. I mean, there are a lot of women who are going to be facing some pretty dire health consequences because of this, not to mention that there are no exceptions to rape and incest, as I said. And, that's we know that, right? This is a real thing. People get raped. There's incest. I had I was a foster mom for a number of years, and one of my kids came to me because she had been raped and got pregnant at 11, which at the time I didn't even know was possible, right? That you could get pregnant at 11. But that's not an anomaly, unfortunately. What I've learned since then is that is very common. So yeah, we have some of the strictest abortion bans in the entire country now, in Arizona, which is really unfortunate.
And it was your opponent in this race.
Yeah, my opponent that News 15 has deemed the face of abortion bans or the face of abortion laws or whatever, because she has run a number of attacks on women's reproductive and healthcare rights for a number of years. I mean, this session alone, she sponsored and actually got across the finish line for three, and then a couple from last session. So yeah, that's who my opponent is. The contrast couldn't be starker than it is. And we absolutely have to win this. I mean, the pressure was already on to win, but now it's really on because women's lives are at stake. And that doesn't even go into all the other, family freedom type issues that come with abortion. I mean, I'm talking just lives like right now.
So it's my understanding that in addition to this law that Governor Ducey signed this year, we also have the territorial era, the 1864 law that a judge just reinstated that bans all abortions except to save a mother's life. So Julie, if you could tell us more about that, what's going on with these two different laws?
Sure. Because I will, and let's start with a good framing of it too, because in my view, what's happening with these two laws is incredibly clear. Arizona legislators have an anti-abortion agenda, and they have used the courts and the legislature and the governor's office to execute that agenda. So back in 1864, and yeah, this isn't a Zoom background. I'm joining you all from the Pebble Creek Democratic Club, so please forgive the funky lighting. In 1864, we passed a series of laws that were, by modern standards, incredibly unjust. These were laws that allowed domestic partners to freely sexually assault each other without having any sort of consequence. This set the age of consent at 10. It's a series of laws that allowed for indentured servitude of Indigenous Arizonans. And then, of course, it contains what has now become 133603 and later 133605. One says that there's a mandatory minimum of 2 years and a max of 5 in prison for a person who procures an abortion. And if you're wondering what that means, we have had big concerns. And I mean, we, the advocacy and the lawyer community, have wondered who exactly a person who procures an abortion is. Is that the patient? Is that the person who drives the patient or pays for the abortion? Is it, strictly speaking, just the medical provider? What do we do in cases where someone self-induces? And all of the other extra legal questions that go along with it. Now, I realize that people are trying to play coy and flip-flop on this issue, but it is, in my view, incredibly clear. The Pima County judge removed a statewide injunction and said that this law is now applicable, which means your county attorneys, all 15 of them, will be empowered to enforce it. Side by side, we have this 15-week ban, which I think is equally clear. In the 15-week ban, there is an immunity for the patient, so at least does provide that sort of of clarity, but it very clearly says that it is not intended to supersede any state law because for better or worse, the Republicans were intelligent about this and knew that this law was on the books, and it tried to legislate around it. So as much as people want to say, like, we're waiting for clarity, we don't understand what the law means, I respectfully call bullshit. They know exactly what they're doing, and they've ended functionally all abortion care in Arizona.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And I'm going to read here straight from Arizona statute, which, you are absolutely right that they've made it clear that the policy preference is to ban abortions to the fullest extent of the law. So straight from statute, all shall be interpreted and construed to acknowledge on behalf of an unborn child at every stage of development, all rights, privileges, and immunities available to other persons, citizens, and residents of the United States. So my oldest kid's 19th birthday was yesterday, and if I handed that kid a bowl with eggs, sugar, butter, flour, and chocolate chips and said, here's your birthday cake, they would not want it because it's not baked, but this is the law that we have.
May I chime in just for a little bit of clarity too, because I think that one part deserves nuance. So you're quoting from SB 1457, which was signed into law 2 legislative sessions ago and creates the standard of fetal personhood and as an interpretive guide. And for at least right now, and we don't know for how much longer, that portion is enjoined under federal law, because everybody was saying, what does this mean? And because if we're taking those words at the face value, that means abortion just isn't this mandatory minimum of 2 years in prison. That could mean, because a fertilized egg has the same rights, privileges, and immunities as you or I, that abortion is first-degree murder, and that fetal child neglect exists, and that felony murder could be applied. And there's a host of other repercussions because of the vagueness and ambiguity of that clear policy preference for banning all abortion at all times under almost all circumstances.
Yes. Senator Marsh, I know that there was a 14-year-old who was denied life-saving medication in Tucson, I believe, last month. And I know that the legislature tried to ban that medication altogether this year. That was on the House side, so I'm not sure how much you know about it, but that's methotrexate, which is also used for rheumatoid arthritis, Cushing's syndrome, and osteoporosis, in addition to ectopic pregnancy and miscarriage. So what do you know about this law, and what do you think about, will it come back, or are we outside the realm where that is even needed at this point?
Well, that didn't make it to us, so I don't know the nuances of the bill. What I can tell you, though, is I just randomly, because I talk to a lot of voters, I call a lot of voters, I'm knocking on a lot of doors, and I randomly called a woman for whom this is an issue, and she is panicked. Her rheumatoid arthritis is, I guess, so debilitating and so bad that it borders on life-threatening. And the idea that she couldn't necessarily take that medicine, if she got pregnant accidentally, it would mean the end of like her way of life, basically. So no, it's really awful. We all know that there are medications that do a number of things, and to ban a particular medication because it also can induce an abortion is just so unjust and so unfair for the people like my constituent who, and this was when we knew the Supreme Court was going to be ruling, but hadn't ruled yet. And she was just absolutely plagued with anxiety because of the effect that this is going to have on her. She's only 28. And she said to me that if this actually all unfolds, she was going to go get sterilized because she cannot get pregnant and also protect her own life, basically.
Yeah, this girl that I read about, that's horrific, by the way. This girl that I read about is 14 and I understand was the first pediatric patient to be denied this medication. Julie, do you have anything to add on this case? Yeah, it's, as a parent of two kids, it boggles my mind to think about them not being able to get the care that they need. This medication was, was allowing this girl to attend school and to live in a manageable amount of pain, like not even pain-free. But Arizona bans mailing the medication. You can only pick it up in person. Okay, what about Plan B, emergency contraception, also known as the morning after pill? How does that factor into existing law? I'm going to throw that to Julie.
Sure. So what existing law says right now is that contraceptives of all kind, whether they be emergency, otherwise, or and even those forms of contraceptives that would seem to fly in the face of the fetal personhood exemption, appear to be safe, at least for right now. And there's a giant asterisk on that, because the way Arizona defines an abortion, it does not include contraceptives, even emergency ones. It also doesn't include non-viable fetuses or those pregnancies that endanger the life of the mother, as determined by the good faith determination of a healthcare provider, which is where we're seeing all these problems, right? When we're hearing legislators and Senator Marsh's colleagues saying outrageous things like ectopic pregnancies can be re-implanted, all doctors are terrified of what a good faith determination of a politician might look like. So no, those at least what exists in Title 36 that helps us define what an abortion is, are exempted. But, and this is the big but, I attempted to get clarity from the county attorney yesterday while we were sitting together at the Arizona Republic's interview of both of the candidates, because we still have a very old law. This one dates back to the 1910s that criminalizes even the advertisement of contraceptives and makes it a misdemeanor. Now, that law is currently enjoined by the Pima County injunction. It's the last portion of the law that's enjoined. I believe we're talking about 133605. The county attorney has previously said that she doesn't believe that the Pima County ruling has anything to do with her, that she has to follow it. And it's very unclear whether or not people trying to obtain Plan B would be thwarted by this misdemeanor prohibition, or if we're going to see our city attorneys going rogue, because that's who primarily has the misdemeanor jurisdiction throughout our state. And that is a very real possibility. It really takes only, and that's been the history while Roe was still in place, right? It only takes one rogue prosecutor, and suddenly we see 1,700 different criminal cases criminalizing patients and pregnancy generally.
Yeah, you mentioned ectopic pregnancy. My stepsister had an ectopic pregnancy and almost died because it wasn't identified as early as it could have been. And like, that's, if you don't get care for an ectopic pregnancy, it's not a viable pregnancy. You just die. You die. Having a little bit of a moment with that. You mentioned Uber drivers and parents and other folks who, circling back to that whole idea of who can be charged. With law varying, and as many questions as there are right now, where do you think that stands? I'm going to throw that to Julie as well.
I think it's really uncertain. I have always feared more for our patients than our providers. And the simple reason why is that, I give 500 hours a year for reproductive justice causes. I've seen what these sorts of cases look like, and I'm terrified. They end up looking like cases like Christine Taylor. She was an Iowa mom, heavily pregnant with her third child. She fell down the stairs. She reported to the emergency room to get checked out. She disclosed to a nurse that she was in a rocky relationship, didn't know how to parent that child, never mind the two at home. And the nurse turned her into police to investigate whether or not she intended to induce an abortion. She was held for 2 days in jail on attempted feticide charges. It's cases like Marsh Jones. She was the Alabama woman that you probably know about. She got into a fight in a parking lot, a verbal fight, and the person she was fighting with shot her in the belly. It took her, and she was pregnant. It took her 6 months to resolve a criminal case for murder or manslaughter because the judge thought that she, quote, should have protected her fetus more. When we talk about these sorts of laws and how they're enforced, I'm so much less concern for the providers or even people who are intentionally seeking abortion. We need to make everyone aware that it's going to be these unintentional instances where people get involved and ensnared with the criminal law. And it also means that the issues surrounding the law aren't just confined to Coconino County, Pima County, and Maricopa County, where we see our abortion providers. It is equally likely that a rogue prosecutor in, I don't know, Yavapai County could decide to enforce this law in a particularly unjust and regressive way. And we know that these prosecutions are highly racialized, highly personal and private, and that they will target the most marginalized members of our community first. I mean, we can almost to a science tell you what the first case in Arizona of the criminalization of pregnancy is going to look like. And it's most likely going to be a member of our BIPOC community who presents in an emergency room in the throes of substance abuse while pregnant, and she will be charged with a crime as a direct result. That's where this is headed. And we know that because of the 1,700 cases that happened while Roe was still the law of the land.
Yeah, you mentioned county attorneys. It's my understanding that only 2 of Arizona's 15 county attorneys have had anything to say about this, and the other 13 are just flat up saying, I don't want to talk about it. I don't have any comment. But I think you're right that's where we are headed. So what can we do? Senator Marsh, what are you expecting if you're reelected for next session, and what's the flavor down there at the moment?
Well, I'm expecting to get reelected. I'm expecting that we're going to actually do pretty well. I mean, my caucus in general. And I think one of the first things that we will be doing is going in and repealing some of these laws. We absolutely have to do. We're trying to get calling for a special session right now because as I've said before, I mean, women are going to die. And we're not just talking about these back alley type abortions that people think of. We're talking for legitimate health concerns, because if the life of the mother is imminently in danger, okay, that's one thing. But what about these longer term things? What about our chemo patients? I asked my oncologist about it point blank, what the effect is, because I'm clear, I'm good, but I was right a year ago right now going through cancer. And as you all know, whether you've had it or not, you still have to see your oncologist. So I saw her last week and asked her just point blank. And she said, it makes me want to cry, the effect that this is going to have on her patients. And then she proceeded to like tear up and basically almost cry. I mean, so, we've got the life of the mother, but then we also have these cases like that where the long-term prognosis could be significantly different. If mine had, we caught mine early. So yeah, I still had to have surgery. I still had to go through chemo, but I have a really good prognosis. How many patients though can't wait that 9 months? For how many patients is that additional 9-month period of time going to be death in 2 or 3 years? So that's what I mean by imminently at risk.
Mm-hmm.
As I said, I can't tell you, I mean, I'm talking to people all day, right? That is what I'm doing right now, talking to voters. Talked to a different doctor, and they brought up the ectopic pregnancy that we were talking about earlier, and that he doesn't know where that leaves him. Because you'd almost have to wait until she's about to die, right? Based on, or you are leaving your fate as a medical profession to judges and to outsiders. That is a really big risk. So yeah, we're going to go in and repeal stuff. we're going to go in and make it safer to be a woman in this state. We're going to make it safer to be a child in this state. And I have full faith that that is indeed how things are going to unfold. And, my hope is that women and children are at risk only for 3 or 4 months instead of for a couple of years.
Yeah. You mentioned, my niece is a medical student, and she has said that patients are no longer telling their doctors the date of their last menstrual period. And she said, that's important information that helps us get the care for them that they need. And like, she gets it, but it makes her very sad. She said there are some women that she's like, I don't know how to prescribe medication. I don't know how to care for this woman because I don't have the information that I need. And they don't feel safe giving it to me. So it's my understanding hospitals are asking for guidance from the state about what constitutes an abortion to save the life of the mother. And DHS hasn't said whether it's going to issue that guidance. Julie, I see you shaking your head. Can you tell us more about this?
This is incredibly frustrating because anybody who's ever worked in medicine or with medical providers know that sometimes it's not even what the law says that's so important. It's like the specter of the law, what people imagine the law says, and this idea of what they can do to prevent any sort of entanglements with the law. And it's kind of the culture that's baked in, especially to obstetrics and gynecology, knowing that your average resident will leave their residency being sued not once, but twice. In the American legal system. So you're seeing people operate out of an abundance and a second abundance of caution in these situations. And I mean, I've heard everything from risk assessment coordinators at hospital saying that, no, there's not going to be any abortion care, even if we believe it to be allowed, because we don't want to see police and prosecutors enter our facility. And it's trickled down into other professions as well, like everything that touches that. I mean, I spoke with a reproductive endocrinologist a few weeks ago who stopped doing retrievals and freezing them because they were so frightened about whether fetal personhood could be unenjoined, become enforceable, and then become retroactive to them. I've heard from social workers who are concerned because they're mandatory reporters. Do they have to report when their patient has an abortion now? Because under some legislators' views, that is fetal child neglect. I mean, there's so much uncertainty amongst practitioners. And at a bare minimum, when we're talking about the criminal law, one of the bedrock principles is that you have notice of what in fact is criminal, so you can conform your actions to the standards of the law. And literally no one is willing to do that, which is why, and I have full faith that Senator Marsh is correct, that we will flip the legislature. We will have a governor who is willing to get these laws repealed. And if not, we will have a county attorney who's willing to be the backstop and say that, no, these prosecutions will never be just.
So to be clear, Senator Marsh, in order to repeal these laws, would we need majorities in both the House and the Senate and the governor's seat?
Yes, ideally, but I think that if there is a majority in one chamber and the governor, I think if there's a combination, it might open the door for at least some negotiation. But no, ultimately we need to flip all three to fully repeal. But I would have hope that even if we don't, if we've got some combination of a lesser thing than we want to happen, that we could still go in there and do some good, save some lives, mitigate some women and children's lives. And I just want to throw something out here that nobody has talked about yet. And I'm trying to find the bill. I've got this packet here, but the Republican legislature in Arizona has taken when personhood starts to the fertilization of the egg, which is contrary, and Julie can elaborate, I'm sure, because she's a lawyer and she knows all this stuff, but instead of at the moment of implantation, which is where the medical community falls and where federal policy falls. And depending on what happens with 1457, that could have a really significant effect if personhood starts at fertilization, which would also then have an effect on, Plan B, on some of these morning after type pills and all of that. I mean, I think they're coming for our contraception, right? Saying that, I think, because I'm a very optimistic, hopeful person. I like to see the best in people. So I'm just going with I think, but I'm sure there are people in this audience who have much stronger views that they're coming after our contraception.
And I think we have a federal Senate candidate who's already said that's where we're headed. But there's a bright spot. So I want to share that there have been large spikes nationally in voter registrations, especially among women ages 18 to 24. And Arizona is actually number 3 highest on the number of young women who are registering themselves to vote. And I get a lot of my news from Twitter, so I apologize that's a tweet, but I pasted the citation into the chat so you all can look at the graph and give yourselves a little hope. What are some other things that we can do other than repealing laws? Go for it.
I think we need to seriously consider an initiative on this, and that when we do that, we come together as a group of stakeholders and come up with something better than codifying Roe. Hang on, I need the soapbox for 1 minute, I promise. Here's the thing. Anytime I hear anybody say that codifying Roe is the answer, I want people who are listening tonight to feel empowered to call BS on that too. Because all Roe v. Wade said is that we have a right to privacy, and that it set up a 3-trimester system, a system where the state had the ability to control when abortions were provided and place regulations. And in particular, the way that played out in Planned Parenthood v. Casey in 1993 was this creation of an undue burden standard. And the problem with an undue burden standard is, first, why are we placing burdens on healthcare to begin with? And there's no other place in law where we really use the word and flesh out the word undue. So what we saw in the Arizona legislature, literally every single session from when we saw Governor Napolitano leave, we saw the Arizona legislature chipping away at abortion rights, whether it be creating different standards that abortion clinics had to operate under, whether it was that they had to misinform patients that they could undo an abortion, whether it was additional informed consent that just wasn't scientific or medically accurate. We saw it nearly every single session. So as we're moving forward together, if we're going to put the time into doing an initiative, which is where I think we're probably headed, I want us to do better than Roe and do better than something that's going to get chipped away literally every single session, because you've got to hand it to the folks who did this. They played the long game. This didn't happen overnight. This was sustained electoral organizing that got us here. And sadly, I think it's going to be sustained electoral organizing that gets us out of this place.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a very important point to remember, is that we didn't get here in a year or in one, legislative cycle or in one presidential cycle. We got here over decades, and it can take a long time to dig ourselves out of a hole that big and that deep. Any more thoughts about an initiative? I know we had an attempt to put something on the ballot for this November. It was very rushed, and there wasn't the, maybe the time for the robust stakeholder process that might be necessary for something of this magnitude. But what can you say about, is that work already underway? Like, I get asked often, regular people, how can I help, protect my rights?
Well, I'll pipe in. I do not know about an initiative, mostly because I am very focused on November 8th, right? If it isn't happening, like right in my immediate future, because I've got to get to November 8th successfully. Because that will go a long ways. I've got to get there and have, be on the winning side of everything. With that said, though, I think that I've heard rumors. I think that that's probably something that maybe could happen. But I think that, what we really can do right now is make sure that people like me and Julie get elected, right? Like we could go in and solve this and save a whole lot of volunteers, time and energy and money if we elect the right legislature on November 8th. So that's what I'm focused on. What happens beyond that? If we need to do that, then, we need to do that. Like if initiative has to happen, then it has to happen. But we've got something far closer to home and closer in time that we all can be doing right now to make sure that women's lives are only in danger for a couple of months versus a couple of years, to make sure that we can get ourselves beyond government mandated pregnancy, because that is what this is.
Yeah. And you mentioned earlier that the choice on our ballot and in many races could not be more stark, your race being one of them. And I definitely agree with that. Ballots drop in, 6 days?
Yeah.
6 days. So
yeah.
When we're talking about things that we can do, everyone always says vote, but I think this is an election where what we need to be doing goes far beyond just voting. And that's why we are called Civic Engagement Beyond Voting. And we have a link tree, which is one of our favorite tools, filled with things that people can do. And not all of them pertain directly to women's rights, but they all kind of do, because they all pertain to electing leaders who will protect women's rights. And there it is in the chat. So this has been kind of bleak. Julie, you have any words to, yeah, you always have words.
You want some good words?
I want some good words.
Y'all, we're gonna win. Mike, we have some internals on my campaign and it shows us up just a few points outside the margin. There's real hope of seeing real change and a new motivated electorate in ways we've never seen before, but it will be the work that we all collectively put in the next month or so that will make literally all the difference. And I want to keep everybody focused at where the real power is on their ballot, because the real power you're going to find centralized right there in the bottom. Whether it be races like Senator Marsh's race or the county attorney's race, these are the races that hold disproportionate impact on everybody's everyday lives. So as we're getting out there, there's two pieces of advice that if I could share nothing else, it's make sure that you're telling people to vote from the bottom up, because we know that the language vote for Democrats up and down the ballot is ineffective. Tell people to vote from the bottom of the ballot up. That way, if they get exhausted, you know that they've hit the power center. The other thing, to steal a quote from another candidate, is we're encouraging people who know how they're going to vote blue in 72. Because what that means for your candidates is if you get that mail-in ballot and you get it in immediately, it shows up on our van immediately. And guess what? We're not texting you. We're not serving you up ads. We're not spending that precious campaign dollars towards someone who already knows where they stand. We can spend our time in these other areas. So the greatest thing that you can do is to vote early and vote from the bottom up.
Yeah. Yeah. And I have heard, and Trisha's the one who shared this idea with me. There are going to be ballot parties this year, as there have been for a number of cycles before this. But this year I hear that they're happening in people's bedrooms, because the Republicans seem to want to be in our bedrooms. So why shouldn't everybody just come into our bedroom and let's fill out our ballots together? And that first weekend after ballot drop, I know that I am going to be having a ballot party. I get many questions every election cycle about, what's on your ballot and why. But, those of us, all of you on this call are absolutely those people who are better informed than the average electorate and can be a resource for the people around you and help your friends, your neighbors, your coworkers, the folks at your church, everybody around you make better, more informed choices as to the people on their ballot. Tricia, I know that you're not featured, but do you have anything to add?
Yeah, we want to celebrate this also because this is a really dry, horrible subject. But this election, the turnout is going to be incredible. We've seen the young Latino women registering. We've seen young white women registering. Like across the spectrum in Arizona, we're seeing people registering to vote at really high numbers, who usually don't pay attention to ballots, to midterm elections. And so this is like our one opportunity to really get people to understand the whole ballot matters and what a Maricopa County attorney does and a state senator does. This is it. This is like the thing they do. And so we're really encouraging a lot of bedroom ballot parties, especially in the age where you have a lot of young kids running around. You can't go get a sitter to go vote. So fill out the ballot at home and mail it in with your girlfriends and tweet it. There's a lot of pictures. I want to see social media light up with people filling out their ballots early.
I love that idea.
And Melinda, can I throw in some hope as well, please?
Yes, please. All the hope.
I think as bleak as all of this is, and it is, no doubt about it, one of the bright unintended consequences, I think, of this is how many people have woken up that might really surprise you. I have been shocked at the number of people who open the doors, who are Republican and who are leading with abortion rights, who are Republican male even, and leading with abortion rights. I mean, I think so many people have woken up. All these folks that have probably not spent more than 90 seconds in their entire lives thinking about abortion one way or the other, right? Because it just didn't land on their doorstep. It now has. And, that part of this horrible situation that we find ourselves in, that one little aspect of it, I think is good. That people are thinking and being intelligent in their thought process, even with deeply held religious beliefs. I had a gentleman tell me for a long time about how he would never condone it, doesn't want it in his family, the whole thing. But he ended it with, but I would never impose my religious beliefs on anyone else. And for that reason, I am very upset about this. It was one of the most poignant conversations that I've had at a door this entire summer. And I think that all of this is hopeful. And I choose to look at the positive, hopeful side of things.
Well, there's so much that we can do, so much that we can affect. And Julie talked a lot about the discretion of attorneys. Kathy, I'm going to put you on the spot. I hope you don't mind. And just talk to us a little bit about judicial discretion, especially as it pertains to ballot watch.
One of the things, this is one of those areas where just being frustrated about something leads you into more work than you ever imagined possible. Because I was very frustrated that it really seemed to be difficult to get information about the judges on our ballot. And I can't count the number of people I've heard from saying, oh my God, I can't hand in my ballot because, I can't figure out what to do with the judges. So we have spent in 2020 and also 2022 months researching publicly available information about the judges on our ballot. And mostly what we are looking for is not judicial opinions that we disagree with, but rather people who bring undue bias into the courtroom. And particularly because I think most of us are aware that the Republicans have spent years now shoving conservative judges into the judicial system, and Ducey has been absolutely not a slouch in that regard. He has not only appointed, I think 60% of the judges who are currently serving in Arizona, but he has also expanded the Supreme Court and expanded the appellate courts, which is giving him the chance to appoint even more judges before he leaves office. So we have researched, I put the link in the chat to Gavel Watch. We have a graphic that will indicate which judges we recommend voting not to retain. And I should say, a judge has never not been retained in Arizona. And I think we could, I mean, I am hoping, that we could make it the first. Bill Montgomery does not deserve to be retained on the Arizona Supreme Court. Ducey, when he originally wanted to nominate Montgomery, the Judicial Appointment Commission, I forget the name, said he deemed that he was not qualified. So Governor Ducey went and stacked the Judicial Commission that nominates judicial nominees, and lo and behold, Bill Montgomery was suddenly qualified, so he was appointed. He is not qualified, and as I'm sure Julie knows full well, the 9 years or 8 years, I think, that he was in the Maricopa County Attorney's Office were absolutely plagued with scandal and poor performance. He is so anti-LGBTQ that he eliminated benefits for all people who are adopting children, instead of allowing LGBTQ couples to have those benefits. So it is shocking that he is on the Supreme Court. He got two not qualified ratings from the Judicial Performance Commission, and that should never happen for the Arizona Supreme Court. So if you remember nothing else, remember not to retain Supreme Court Justice Bill Montgomery. There are 5 other justices if you read the report, and if you read the full report, there are a number of other judges that I did not feel that we had the evidence to recommend not to retain them, but I have serious concerns. So from my research and from some of the cases that I read about. So I would urge you to go in and look over that list. Please, please share it widely, because that is the only way we have to distribute access to that list. So thank you for giving me a little soapbox, Tricia. It's probably a little longer than you expected. And I would also certainly say that Melinda has done an unbelievable job of analyzing the propositions, and we are going to be giving several presentations on both the judges and the propositions. So look in your email for those links.
Melinda, you're muted. Love you,
So
darling.
I am. I was trying to be a good digital citizen and forgot to unmute. Thank you, Kathy, for that rundown. And I put the link in the chat. So everything that we have mentioned is available on our ballot guide page on our website, which is cebv.us. So Julie, do you have anything to add about judges? It's such an important area of our ballot.
Nope, vote them out, do what Gavel Watch says, and we're going to have a much more functional judiciary. And with that, I need to fall off because I'm up next to speak. It has been my pleasure this evening. I hope to see people at Women's March. And then we are hosting Boozy Brunch afterwards. If you would like a place to go, check out Charo Hipster.
Thank you so much for joining us. It's informative and a joy as always.
I heard what brunch you all? We're having brunch on Saturday after the march?
Yes, we are. Charo
Okay.
Hipster.
All
Check
right.
my Twitter feed.
Yes.
Come play. It'll be good.
This is why you follow candidates on Twitter and Facebook, you guys. This is why.
Absolutely. Well, it looks like we're going to be wrapping a couple of minutes early. Christine, do you have anything to add to everything that you've already said?
No, other than very happy to be here, very happy to see people here and engaged, and y'all, I'm a big fan of civic engagement beyond voting, so please keep it up.
Thank you so much for joining us
Normally we
tonight.
would, excuse me, Melinda, normally we would have questions, but I think that the questions that were put in the chat early on were actually answered in the course of discussion, so.
Mhm. And I tried to weave those in as
Thank
we
you.
went. Yeah. Then I feel good. I feel good about your chances. I feel good about Julie's chances. And I mean, I have heard from a couple acquaintances of mine, Republican men, fathers, who said, I'm going to vote differently this year because my kids' rights are on the line and nobody should be telling my little girl what to do. So I feel good. And
Yep, me too. Let's
Yeah.
get it
The
done.
ballots drop next week.
yes, they do.
Let's get busy.
Absolutely.
Join a canvas this weekend.
But thank you all for joining us and have a great night.
Thank you.
Thank you.